The Ventaxian soldier grinned as he dragged the terrified human boy toward the transport ship, ignoring the child's desperate screams and the smell of fresh blood on his armor. He didn't know those screams would soon have the Ventaxians themselves shrieking in terror as humanity came for revenge. In the year 2247, 8-year-old Robert Russell became the first human enslaved by the Ventaxians, a cruel empire that had conquered countless alien worlds. Snatched from his family in a remote colony, Robert was hauled back to the Ventaxian homeworld. There, he was forced into servitude in the palace of Emperor Zephyr himself. For 12 grueling years, Robert endured abuse and hardship. But the Ventaxians underestimated human resilience. Robert survived, and he learned, studying his captors' technology and culture, biding his time. That time came when Robert turned 20. Seizing an opportunity, he stole a shuttle and fled the palace. After a frantic chase, Robert escaped his pursuers long enough to send a transmission hurtling toward distant Earth before his power failed. That transmission reached the United Earth Defense Force and revealed the terrible truth. Humanity's first contact with aliens was an act of war and cruelty against a child. Enraged Earth leaders knew they had to act. Admiral Jake Harris convinced the president to greenlight an audacious rescue mission. Assembling an elite team, Admiral Harris set forth in Earth's most advanced prototype warship, following the coordinates Robert had sent. But Robert's escape had now ensnared his entire species. Emperor Zephyr, furious at human defiance, dispatched a battle fleet to assault Earth itself, vowing to crush the primitives before they could challenge Ventaxian supremacy. As the forces of Earth and the Ventaxian Empire converged, racing toward a cataclysmic confrontation, the fate of two civilizations hung on three individuals hurtling toward destiny: a desperate young man, a determined admiral, and a merciless alien ruler. Robert had escaped, but humanity's fight had just begun. The Ventaxians were coming. Earth had only one message for them: run. Earth had only one message for them: run. Admiral Jake Harris wrapped his hand around the chairs of his command chair as his prototype warship, the ESS Prometheus, hurtled through the void of space. His eyes scanned the sensor readouts, searching for any sign of the Ventaxian shuttle carrying Robert Russell, the young man whose desperate transmission had revealed the alien threat to Earth. "Admiral, we're picking up a distress signal," Lieutenant Commander Maria Juarez reported from her station. "It's weak, but the signature matches Ventaxian technology." Harris narrowed his eyes. "Could be a trap. Approach with caution. Shields up, weapons on standby." The Prometheus slowed as it neared the source of the signal, a battered Ventaxian shuttle drifting aimlessly. Scorch marks scarred its hull, and one of its engines flickered weakly. "No signs of other vessels in the vicinity," Juarez said. Harris nodded. "Prepare a boarding party. If Robert's on that shuttle, we're bringing him home." Moments later, the Prometheus docked with the shuttle. Harris led a team of his most trusted officers, weapons drawn, as they breached the airlock. Inside the shuttle, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the alien corridors. A trail of dark blood led them to the cockpit. There, slumped over the controls, was a young man in tattered clothing, his skin pale and his breathing shallow. "Robert Russell?" Harris called out. The man stirred, his eyes flickering open. Who are you?" "Admiral Jake Harris, United Earth Defense Force. We're here to take you home, son." As the team's medic, Lieutenant Alex Sato, rushed to stabilize Robert, the young man grabbed Harris's arm with a surprising strength. Earth is in danger," Robert gasped. "The Ventaxians! They're coming!" On the Prometheus, Robert recounted his harrowing escape from Ventaxian captivity. He shared critical intel about the Empire's impending attack on Earth, revealing their technology, tactics, and weaknesses gleaned from his years of enslavement. Harris listened intently, his mind racing. They had to warn Earth, but the Prometheus alone stood little chance against a full Ventaxian fleet. An idea struck him. "Robert, you said you worked on Ventaxian ships. Could we integrate their technology into the Prometheus?" Robert nodded. "I can guide your engineers. We can boost the ship's capabilities, give Earth a fighting chance. Harris gave the order. Under Robert's guidance, the Prometheus crew worked feverishly to modify the ship with salvaged Ventaxian tech. Shields were reinforced, weapons enhanced, and engines supercharged. As the final modifications were completed, Harris looked upon the transformed vessel with a mix of pride and purpose. "We'll call her the ESS Defiance," he declared, "and she'll lead the charge in Earth's defense." The Defiance set a course for Earth at maximum speed, racing against time to warn of the impending Ventaxian attack. Light years away, Emperor Zephyr stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, a cruel smile playing across his lips as his fleet approached Earth. These primitive humans would soon learn the price of defiance. But as the vanguard of the Ventaxian attack force dropped out of hyperspace, they were met by a wall of human ships, a surprisingly resilient Earth defense fleet, forewarned by Admiral Harris's urgent transmission. The Ventaxians opened fire, confident in their superior strength. Human ships exploded under the onslaught, but for every vessel destroyed, 2 more took its place. The human defenders fought with a tenacity and ingenuity the Ventaxians had never encountered, employing daring tactics and clever feints to stall the alien advance. Amidst the chaos of battle, a new ship emerged from the depths of hyperspace, the ESS Defiance, its hybrid human Ventaxian technology making it a formidable foe. Admiral Harris and Robert, standing side by side on the bridge, led the charge. The Defiance wove through the enemy lines, its enhanced weapons cutting swaths through the Ventaxian formations. Harris coordinated with the Earth fleet, exploiting weaknesses in the alien defenses revealed by Robert's intel. On the planet below, Earth's combined military might rallied to push back the invaders. Human forces, armed with rapidly adapted Ventaxian tech, launched coordinated strikes against the alien landing craft. Though losses mounted on both sides, the human defenders held their ground, fighting with the knowledge that the fate of their world hung in the balance. As the tide of battle began to turn in Earth's favor, the Defiance closed in on Emperor Zephyr's dreadnought. Robert, his eyes burning with a mix of vengeance and dedication, volunteered to lead a boarding party to confront the Emperor directly. Admiral Harris clasped the young man's shoulder. "You've been through hell, Robert. You don't have to do this." Robert met his gaze. "I have to. For my family. For Earth. For every human the Ventaxians have ever wronged." With a team of the Defiance's most skilled fighters at his back, Robert boarded the Ventaxian flagship, determined to end the Emperor's reign of terror once and for all. As the battle raged outside and the Defiance's guns hammered at the dreadnought's shields, Robert and his team fought their way deeper into the enemy ship, planting explosive charges at critical junctures. The corridors rang with the clash of weapons fire and the cries of the wounded. Robert pressed forward, driven by an unbreakable will. He had spent 12 long years as a slave to the Ventaxians, but now he would be their undoing. At last, they breached the dreadnought's command deck. Emperor Zephyr turned to face them, his eyes widening in disbelief as he recognized the human boy he had once held captive. "You," the Emperor hissed, "you should have learned your place, slave." Robert raised his weapon, aiming it squarely at Zephyr's heart. "I am not your slave. I am Robert Russell of Earth, and today your empire falls." The Emperor's laughter was cut short as Robert pulled the trigger. Robert's heart pounded as he led his team through the twisting corridors of the Eternal Dominion. The acrid smell of ozone filled the air as energy weapons discharged around them. Years of servitude had etched every inch of this ship into his memory, and now that knowledge guided their assault. "Left here," Robert called out, ducking as a blast of plasma scorched the wall behind him. "Watch for the hidden turrets in the ceiling." On cue, defensive weaponry emerged from concealed panels. The human commandos reacted swiftly, their modified weapons cutting through the Ventaxian defenses. Outside, the ESS Defiance swooped and dove through the chaotic space battle. Admiral Harris gripped his command chair. "All batteries concentrate fire on the Dominion's port shield generator," he ordered. "Let's give our boarding team an opening." The Defiance unleashed a barrage of hybrid ordnance. Ventaxian energy shields, previously impenetrable to Earth weapons, buckled under the onslaught. "Shield breach detected," Lieutenant Juarez reported. "Robert's team is go for insertion." Inside the Dominion, alarms blared as Robert and his squad fought their way deeper into the ship's core. They encountered increasingly fierce resistance, Zephyr's elite guards throwing themselves at the human intruders. "Push forward!" Robert shouted, his voice hoarse from exertion. "The Emperor's chambers are just ahead." As they breached the final set of blast doors, Robert found himself face to face with Emperor Zephyr. Memories of abuse and torment flooded his mind, and with a primal roar, he charged. The two combatants grappled fiercely, Zephyr's alien strength nearly overwhelming the human. But Robert had learned much during his captivity. He twisted, exploiting a weakness in Ventaxian anatomy, and suddenly Zephyr was at his mercy. Robert's finger tightened on the trigger, vengeance within his grasp. But he hesitated, his conscience battling years of pain and anger. "Surrender," Robert demanded, his voice shaking. "End this madness now." Zephyr's face contorted with rage. "Never!" he spat, smacking his palm onto a nearby console. Klaxons began to wail as the ship's self-destruct sequence initiated. "You'll die with me, slave," Zephyr snarled. Robert's team grabbed him, dragging him away from the Emperor. "We have to go now," his second-in-command urged. They raced through the disintegrating ship, barely making it to their shuttle as the Eternal Dominion erupted in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave buffeted their small craft as they sped back towards the Defiance. In the battle's aftermath, the remaining Ventaxian ships scattered, their will to fight evaporating with the loss of their flagship and Emperor. Earth's defenders pressed their advantage, driving the invaders back. Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Harris embraced a weary Robert as he stumbled onto the bridge. "You did it, son," Harris said proudly. "Earth is safe thanks to you." As they limped back to Earth, Robert gazed out at the stars. The war wasn't over. Scattered reports suggested Zephyr might have escaped, and the vast Ventaxian Empire still loomed. But humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with. For the first time in years, Robert allowed himself to feel hope for the future. The wreckage of Ventaxian ships drifted in Earth's orbit, a testament to humanity's unexpected victory. But amid the debris, a small craft slipped away unnoticed. Inside, Emperor Zephyr seethed with rage, his fists clenched as he watched his grand invasion crumble. "Set course for the homeworld," he snarled to his pilot. "Full speed." Back on Ventax Prime, Zephyr wasted no time. He stormed into the war room, his eyes blazing. "I want every ship, every soldier ready to crush these human vermin." A nervous advisor cleared his throat. "But sire, our losses—" Zephyr's hand shot out, gripping the advisor's throat. "Losses? The only loss I see is your courage." With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the choking official aside. "Anyone else want to question me?" Silence fell over the room. Zephyr nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now triple our weapons production. I want new warships rolling off the assembly lines day and night." On Earth, Robert Russell stood before a cheering crowd, uncomfortable with the adulation. Admiral Harris clapped him on the back. "They need this, son, a hero to rally behind." Robert nodded, then leaned in close. "We can't let our guard down, Admiral. Zephyr won't stop until we're all dead or enslaved." "Agreed," Harris said. "That's why I'm putting you in charge of our countermeasures division. Your knowledge of Ventaxian tech is our secret weapon." Weeks passed in a blur of strategy meetings and late nights poring over schematics. Robert's mind raced with possibilities, drawing on every scrap of information he'd gleaned during his years of captivity. One night he burst into Harris's office, his eyes alight with excitement. "I've got it, Admiral. A forward base hidden deep in unexplored space. We can strike at their supply lines, chip away at their strength." Harris leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." Robert spread out a series of plans on the desk. "We'll call it Fort Freedom. It'll have defenses they've never seen before, a fusion of human ingenuity and reverse-engineered Ventaxian tech." Construction began in secret. ships ferrying supplies and personnel to a distant, unremarkable planet. Robert oversaw every detail, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion. But they weren't as hidden as they thought. On Ventax Prime, a spy delivered grainy images to Emperor Zephyr. The Emperor's eyes narrowed as he studied the half-built outpost. "So," he hissed, "the slaves think they can challenge us in our own territory?" He turned to his fleet commander. "Assemble our elite forces. We'll crush this Fort Freedom before it can become a thorn in our side." At Fort Freedom, Robert paced the command center, reviewing defense readiness when alarms blared. He rushed to the main view screen, his heart sinking as Ventaxian warships dropped out of hyperspace. "Battle stations," he shouted. "This is not a drill." The skeleton crew scrambled to their posts as enemy fighters screamed towards the base. Robert's mind raced, remembering every weakness, every flaw in Ventaxian tactics he'd observed. "Divert power to the shield harmonics," he ordered. "Modulate them to match their weapons frequency." The first salvo of Ventaxian fire splashed harmlessly against the shields. Robert allowed himself a small smile. "Now, let's show them what we've learned. All batteries, open fire." A storm of energy bolts unlike anything the Ventaxians had seen erupted from Fort Freedom's defenses. Enemy ships exploded, caught off guard by the hybrid weaponry. But the Ventaxians kept coming, wave after wave. Robert's crew fought valiantly, but they were vastly outnumbered. Sweat dripped down his face as he called out orders, trying to stem the tide. A massive explosion rocked the base. "Hull breach in Section 3, someone shouted. Robert grabbed a weapon. "Form up on me," he called to a group of nearby soldiers. "We'll hold them at the choke point." They raced through corridors filled with smoke and sparking wires. As they rounded a corner, Robert skidded to a halt. There, flanked by elite guards, stood Emperor Zephyr himself. "Well, well," Zephyr sneered. "The troublesome slave returns." Robert raised his weapon. "I'm not your slave anymore, Zephyr, and I never will be again." With a roar of fury, Zephyr charged. Robert dodged the first blow, years of survival instincts kicking in. They traded punches and kicks, neither giving ground. Robert caught a glimpse of a tattoo on Zephyr's neck, a weak spot in Ventaxian anatomy he'd learned about during his captivity. He feinted left, then struck hard at the exposed area. Zephyr howled in pain, staggering back. But before Robert could press his advantage, a massive explosion rocked the base. Through the viewport, Robert saw a welcome sight. Earth ships dropping out of hyperspace, guns blazing. Admiral Harris's voice crackled over the comms. "Hang on, Robert, the cavalry's here." As Fort Freedom's defenders rallied, Robert turned back to face Zephyr, ready for round 2 of their brutal confrontation. The air crackled with tension as Robert and Zephyr circled each other, sweat and blood mingling on their faces. Robert lunged forward, his fist connecting with Zephyr's jaw. The Emperor staggered back, spitting purple blood. "You've learned well, slave," Zephyr snarled, wiping his mouth. "I'm not your slave anymore," Robert growled, dodging a vicious counterattack. The two combatants traded blows, their bodies a blur of motion. Robert's years of captivity had honed his reflexes, allowing him to anticipate Zephyr's moves. But the Ventaxian Emperor fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his strikes fueled by rage and humiliation. Just as Robert seemed to gain the upper hand, pinning Zephyr against a damaged console, the Emperor's eyes gleamed with malice. "You think you've won," he hissed. "Think again." A hidden panel on Zephyr's armor slid open, revealing a pulsing device. Before Robert could react, a blinding flash erupted, followed by a deafening boom. The electromagnetic pulse ripped through the command center, frying every electronic system in its wake. Robert's powered exoskeleton seized up, locking him in place. Around him, screens flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency klaxons fell silent, leaving an eerie quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of battle. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Robert saw Zephyr struggling out of his own disabled armor. The two adversaries faced each other, stripped of their technological advantages, reduced to their most primal state. "Now," Zephyr sneered. "We finish this like true warriors." They clashed again, fists and feet flying in a deadly dance. Robert's human agility gave him an edge, but Zephyr's alien physiology granted him unnatural strength. They grappled and struck, neither willing to yield. Outside, Fort Freedom's garrison raced to restore power. Technicians worked feverishly to bypass fried circuits, their efforts punctuated by curses and the sparking of damaged equipment. Robert and Zephyr's fight carried them across the debris-strewn command center. They crashed through toppled consoles and shattered view screens, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Blood, both red and purple, spattered the floor as they traded vicious blows. Suddenly, Zephyr's hand closed around a fallen human weapon, a plasma rifle that had escaped the EMP's effects. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with cruel triumph as he raised the gun. "No!" Robert shouted, but it was too late. Zephyr opened fire, cutting down several of Robert's comrades who had just entered the room. Their bodies fell, smoke rising from charred wounds. Rage exploded within Robert's chest. With a primal roar, he charged at Zephyr, tackling the Emperor to the ground. The plasma rifle skittered across the floor as they grappled, all pretense of skill abandoned in favor of raw, animalistic fury. They rolled across the floor, trading savage blows. Robert's fists pummeled Zephyr's face, while the Emperor's claws raked bloody furrows across Robert's arms. Neither combatant noticed the rising whine of the base's fusion reactors, pushed beyond their limits by Zephyr's saboteurs. As alarms blared anew, warning of imminent catastrophe, Robert finally gained the upper hand. He straddled Zephyr's chest, one hand wrapped around the Emperor's throat, the other poised to deliver a killing blow. Time seemed to slow as Robert stared into his nemesis's eyes. He saw reflected there all the pain, all the hatred that had driven him for so long. In that moment, Robert understood that to kill Zephyr would be to become him, to perpetuate the cycle of violence that had consumed both their lives. With the base teetering on the brink of destruction, Robert made his choice. He released Zephyr's throat and hauled the Emperor to his feet. "End this," Robert demanded, gesturing to a still-functioning emergency console. "Deactivate the failsafe, or we all die here." Zephyr's eyes darted between Robert and the flashing warning lights. For a moment, it seemed he might choose mutual destruction. Then, with a snarl of defeat, he input a complex series of commands. One by one, the alarms fell silent as the reactor overload stabilized. But the damage was done. Fort Freedom, once a symbol of human resilience, now lay in smoky ruins. As the last tremors subsided, Robert grabbed Zephyr's arm and began dragging him toward the evacuation point. Through shattered viewports, they could see Admiral Harris's ships descending through the atmosphere, come to save what remained of the outpost's defenders. Robert pushed Zephyr into a waiting shuttle, keeping a wary eye on his defeated foe. As the craft lifted off, Robert watched Fort Freedom recede below them, secondary explosions still blooming across its battered surface. Admiral Harris's voice crackled over the comm. "Fort Freedom is lost, but you've saved countless lives today, son. Well done." Robert said nothing, his eyes fixed on the huddled form of Emperor Zephyr. This victory felt hollow, tainted by the blood spilled and the destruction wrought. He knew that as long as Zephyr lived, as long as the hatred between their peoples burned, this war was just the beginning. The shuttle docked with Harris's flagship, and Robert led his captive emperor toward the brig. As they walked, Robert leaned close to Zephyr's ear. "This ends today," he whispered. "One way or another, I'm going to break this cycle of violence, even if it means keeping you alive to do it." Zephyr's only response was a hate-filled glare as the brig doors slid shut behind him, leaving Robert alone with the weight of his choices and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Weeks later, Robert stood on the viewing platform of a maximum security prison, carved into the rocky surface of Earth's moon. He watched as guards escorted the shackled form of Emperor Zephyr into the facility. As Zephyr disappeared from view, Robert placed his hand against the cold glass. "This is how it has to be," he murmured, "for both our peoples. We have to find a better way." But even as Robert turned to leave, a security officer approached with an urgent report. An unmarked ship had been detected retrieving an escape pod bearing Ventaxian markings. The pod's identifier matched Zephyr's royal crest. Robert's eyes hardened as he absorbed the news. The Battle of Fort Freedom might be over, but it seemed the war between humans and Ventaxians had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.